Hello, Squirrel Tribe. So, as a 42-year-old female, it turns out I take a lot of things for granted. I was not aware that just 50 years ago, I personally, as a female in the United States of America, could not have my own bank account if I didn't have a man that was willing to co-sign on it with me. I'm not aware of that because my entire lifetime, it has been something a woman has been allowed to have or do, or however you want to phrase that. In 1974 is when everything changed. This year, 2024, marks the 50th anniversary of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, protects women's rights to access to credit. Now, before the law, women needed their husbands, fathers, or brothers to co-sign for a loan or credit card. I sit here and I see movies of, back in the day, hippie stuff. We'll call it hippie stuff. Movies made in the 60s, or movies about the 60s, movies about the 70s, and even movies about the 80s. And I never really hear anybody talking about in these movies that, a woman had to have a man do these things for her in order for her to have her own anything. Because at that point, it's still not her own. If a man has co-signed for it, it's still not the woman's, right? Whether it's a bank loan, whether it's a home loan, whether it's a bank account itself, it's still not hers if a man is attached to it. So in 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974 was passed so women could have better rights, right? And it says here, they were granted the right to open a bank account on their own. Technically, women won the right to open a bank account in the 1960s. So maybe that's why I never hear about it in movies or really see it as a thing. But in the 60s, they were granted the right to have a bank account. But until 1974, they still had to have a man's name on that bank account. Many of you will already know this because a lot of you are older than I am. So you lived through this. You lived through the ability of not being able to, one, have a job as a female. Then you lived through the ability to have the job, but your husband or whoever else in your household that was male probably had control of the paycheck. Then you were able to get a bank account, but not without the husband or the brother or the father to co-sign on it. So what about women who weren't married? What about women who didn't have brothers? What about women who didn't have fathers? How did they get a bank account? Those are things that I'm curious about. And I need to talk to my mom about that. Although, there was the husband and a father option for her. No brother. My mom had a sister, but not a brother. But I'm very curious how women then were able to do the things that women today have the rights and ability to do if they didn't have the people needed in order to meet the requirements of all the things that we can do today. That's absolutely crazy to stop and think about. The older I get, the more I realize that I don't know a lot. And a lot of people my age or younger than me also don't know a lot. A lot of people my age and older also don't know a lot. We're never going to know everything. Nobody out there knows every single thing, which is why I like to learn more stuff. So when I saw this come up, this is what I saw pop up today. I saw a picture of these women and I was like, who are these women? I was immediately intrigued by this group of women. So I clicked on what this was, and it says says until 1974 in the USA, women were unable to open a bank account or acquire a line of credit without a man co-signing. The financial services industry was led by usually white men. So 8 women came together to turn everything around by opening their own women's bank. Carol Green, Judy Wagner, Lorraine Orulian, Gail Schotler, Wendy Davis, Joy Burns, Beverly Martinez, and Edna Mosley founded the bank's board by each pitching in $1,000. On July 14th, 1978, so 4 years later, the Women's Bank opened for business. People stood in line down the street in downtown Denver to deposit their money. The first day's deposits exceeded $1 million. That's a lot. When you stop and think about, this is a bank opened by women, right, in 1978, opened by women, for the first time where women were allowed to have their own account without a man co-signing on it, and $1 million was deposited. That's a lot of women who had the ability to finally have some sort of, I'm going to use the word freedom, but even at the same time, that doesn't sound like the right word. They had their own independence. We'll go with that. They had their own independence where they could have their own account, their own money, their own whatever. My husband and I, we have a account together for bills and things, but we have our own separate accounts because in my opinion, you should never put, I say it all the time, put all your eggs in one basket. And I do believe that refers to money as well. And a lot of people will see that differently. They'll say, if you're married, everything is everybody's. And I agree with that. His money is my money is his money. But I look at it as now, because of the age of technology that we're in, if that one account that we happen to have gets hacked, then we're both screwed, right? So we have the one for the two of us. And then I have my own account, he has his own account. If something were to happen to one of the three, we have two to fall back on. And to me, that's important, right? So when I see that women were finally able to get their own bank accounts in 1974, I think it's great in the aspect of it gave independence, one, so women who had paychecks could say, look, I have my own account too. It's nice to feel like you own something of your own, that there's not always somebody else's name attached to it. There's something to be said for independence. And honestly, and it may sound wrong to a lot of people, but men will never understand that. They've always had the ability to do everything because they have always been top of the chain in society, in business, in absolutely everything. So when women's rights started to catch up a little bit, it felt good for women, right? Now, I will say that, and this is where some people may not agree, and again, that's perfectly fine. These are my opinions, and not everybody's going to agree. And it would be really weird and boring if we all thought the exact same way. But the older I get, oh, this is going to sound so wrong. The older I get, the more I realize that maybe some of the things that have happened in the past have made it worse for us as a society, as a country. I'm not saying the right to vote, women's right to vote is bad. I'm not saying the right for women to have checking accounts is bad. I'm not saying the right for women to get a home loan, because even until 1974, women couldn't get a home loan. So heaven forbid you're a single woman who hasn't gotten married. How are you supposed to get your own home? You're renting, right? So at least then this was the ability for a woman to own her own home, her own property, which helped with the housing market, right? And things like that. But it feels like and it's only been 50 years. And if I look at it that way, if I look at it as it's only been 50 years, it feels like the downfall from 1974 to now has been significant. Because you have to think, if in 1974, before 1974, women couldn't get their own homes, they couldn't have their own bank accounts, it kind of probably made more women want to get married. Maybe out of necessity as opposed to actual want, right? Necessity sometimes outweighs wants. So maybe a lot of women got married because they needed to in order to have that home, in order to have a bank account, in order to have any of these other things. And then, children were had. So you have your traditional homes up until possibly 1974, when more independence was given to women, right? When the workforce started and women were going off to work in the very beginning, it was because men were going off to war and things needed to happen. So women were stepping up to do the things that men had been doing while the men were gone, protecting the country and everybody in it. And so that's a little different. But then when men came back and women were still going to work, it started possibly the downhill of society. And every year it seems that things have gotten a little bit worse. And again, there's going to be people out there who are going to say that I am, batshit crazy for saying that maybe we've gone downhill a little. But if you look back at our country before women had more rights. Oh, that sounds so awful to say out loud as a woman. I fully understand it. But if you look back before women had more rights, you had more families that were together, right? You had more children outside playing. You had more people who were independent as a community or as a family, growing their own food, taking care of their own things, washing clothes in a sink and in a wash tub and then hanging them up to dry. We weren't so reliant on things. The more, I don't even know how to put all these thoughts into words, but I'm trying here. So the more freedoms, maybe that's the right word. We want freedom, right? That's what the United States is all about. The freedom to be who we are, the freedom to do what we want to do, right? The whole thing is to protect our freedom, right? But the more freedoms we are given as a society, the farther down the crapper we seem to go. You have all these different groups who want their own month, like this month. And you have all these different protesters everywhere because now they have the freedom to do these kind of things with, honestly, no gosh, I hate when my brain doesn't brain, with no consequences, it seems. All these kids in college that are, you know, paying all this money and they're out there protesting for stuff. They have no fucking clue what they're doing, right? But it just seems like our traditional values, and I talked about this last week sometime, our traditional values have shifted. When I was younger, I never thought of traditional values. I mean, my mom is a single mom, so I didn't have the mother-father household, right? I had my mom, I stayed with my Nana, I saw my dad. I don't have siblings. I mean, I have a half brother on my dad's side, but I didn't come up from a traditional family, so it never occurred to me to think about the traditional family roles, right? And so now as I get older and I look around at how our country is and society is and stuff like that, it makes me go, I wonder if it was better in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, before more people had rights and freedoms. And again, that sounds absolutely awful no matter how you say it. But when I sit here and read this and go, it's only been 50 years since women could have a bank account. And we've gone from we're allowed to have a bank account to now women have forgotten how to have like self-respect and have thought that, you know, racking up body counts is what makes them, and by body counts I mean people they sleep with, makes them, you know, popular or great or brag about, or it's just so weird to me. You look back in the days of like Patsy Cline and Loretta Lynn and people, you know, how they dressed and how they carried themselves, to today, like any pop star today who are like a third of the way, like 2/3 of the way naked on stage and twerking and doing all these different things. And it's like, how did we go from this to this? How is this a thing? I mean, even back in the early 1900s or even the 1940s, 1950s, men dressed respectfully. And now today it's like, what are y'all wearing? And it just seems like we have continuously gone downhill with the more freedoms and rights that we have gotten. You'd think we would take better care of all of that and do better because of those things. But it feels like we've just taken everything for granted and kind of crapped on it all. I don't know. When I saw this picture of these women, fully covered, fully dressed women, and I know people are going to be like, it's weird you're having this conversation as you have tattoos. No, I agree. I started getting tattoos when I was 18. I'm not getting any more tattoos. I love what I have, but now even I am like, okay, maybe I don't want to do any more to my body, right? You know, and again, as you get older, you get wiser. You think about things a little bit differently as you get older, especially when you have a daughter and you see what society is like today versus society was like back when I was a child versus society when my mom was a kid. Things have changed so incredibly drastically. I don't want to know what it's going to be like when I have grandkids, what society is going to be like for them, right? But when I saw this picture of these women, let's see if I can get that to show up without there being like a huge glare. When I saw the picture of these women, I was like, look how happy they are. And I wanted to know why. And that's how I learned that it's only been 50 years since a woman could have a bank account on her own without a man attached to it. And I feel like that, I don't know when the beginning of feminism was. I don't know if there's like a certain year where that just, you know, took off. I am not a traditional wife. Trad wife seems to be like the word that everybody uses now. I'm not a traditional wife, but I am in certain aspects. I wash all the clothes. I clean the house. I do the grocery shopping. I cook all the meals. I fix my husband's plate. I fix his coffee in the morning. Like I am in certain aspects what a traditional family wife was before women had the ability to go to work, to have their own bank accounts, to do all these things. And I love that part. It would be weird to me to not take care of my husband. But there's also nothing wrong with that. Like I worked corporate America for the longest. I mean, I needed to have money as a teenager, as a 20-something, 30-something, right? So it wasn't an option for girls, women, as I was growing up, to not work unless you just wanted to be taken care of by a man, right? Well, at 16, that's weird. So I had a job. At 22, that's still weird. I had a job. Then I meet my husband and I still have a job because it's what I'm used to. Although when I got pregnant, he said, you don't have to go back to work. You know, we can figure this out and you can stay home. And I still decided to go back to work because it's what I knew. Then after a few years, I was like, oh, wait, I don't like this. I don't like my child being in daycare. I don't like going to work to spend half of my paycheck to have her in daycare. I don't like missing her as a child, like growing up, to go work to make somebody else money, right? So my husband and I, we started our own company, and then we worked together. And it helped me become more of that stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home housewife that a lot of people don't have the ability to do, or a lot of people do have the ability to do, but like me at the time, they don't want to make the sacrifices, or they think it's too much work, or they don't understand maybe how important it is. But also, it's not feasible for everybody. If you're a single parent, it's not feasible. If you are literally struggling to make ends meet, even as a married couple, it's not feasible for somebody to stay home. You can never judge anybody for doing what they have to do in order to support their family. So you do you, boo, every single day, no matter what. You do what works for you and yours, and what you can sleep with at the end of the night, right? But I was definitely thankful that I was able to become that stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home housewife kind of thing while still running our business. And it's crazy how my perception of everything has changed from 16 to 20 to 30 to 42. And I wonder what it's going to be like when I'm 50, when I'm 60, as the world keeps changing, as the world turns. And I see all these changes that are happening. And I can now think back, man, back in my day, you know what I mean? When I was a child, or when I was younger, I could go to the mall and be safe. My mom could drop me off at the mall. I could go out of my house and run around the neighborhood until the street lights came on and be perfectly fine. And I could go places, and if there was an emergency, I would pull out a quarter, actually it was a dime, and then a quarter, and make a phone call on a payphone. And then they took away payphones. They took away payphones to make it so you had to have a cell phone, because everything's about profit over people. They wanted more money for the corporations. They wanted all this other stuff. They took away the ability for your safety if you didn't have a phone in your pocket all the time. There are no more payphones anywhere. So if you are being stalked, or if your car breaks down, or you have some sort of emergency, you could just walk over and make a phone call. It's not possible anymore. And to me, that was a horrific thing they did. And I hate that they've taken away payphones. And most stores won't let you use their phone, but then you also have to be near a store to use a phone. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. But again, the whole point of this, it blew my mind to realize it's only been 50 years since a woman has been legally allowed to have her own bank account. And in the last 50 years, the absolutely dramatic change in the way society was to the way society is now, that's friggin' mind-boggling. I feel like we've had more change in the last 50 years than there were in the 150 years before it. And it has been, sorry, like severe changes. And obviously not all for the better. If you just stop and look around at where our country is, who's at the helm of it, the things that have happened in it, the way it's being overtaken by everybody else, like, it's absolutely crazy. And I'm curious, for those of you watching who've made it this far, thank you, who were among the first few women who were able to go get a bank account, how did it make you feel? And if you stop and think about it, do you feel differently about it today? Just out of curiosity. Anyway, I have more stuff for later, but this is something I just thought was like extremely interesting and made me think about things a little differently today. So I just wanted to bring it to you. Squirrel Tribe, I love you guys immensely, and I'll see you later. Bye.